Hello everyone, welcome back to World Talks on TVP World. I'm Anna Kalczyńska. Military aid and Ukraine's reconstruction have taken central stage at the high-level meeting of European leaders in Rome. At the same time, fresh Russian strikes on Ukraine have served as a stark reminder of the ongoing war. We're meeting now John Herbst, former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. Good morning, sir, and thank you for being with us here on TVP World. You are Senior Director of the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. You served for 31 years as a Foreign Service Officer in the U.S. Department of State, and you were ambassador to Ukraine from 2003 to 2006. May I start with a simple question? As it stands,
please,
can Ukraine rely on Washington?
Good question. I have felt all along that it would be hard for President Trump to do what his critics have said he plans to do, which is to disengage from Ukraine, reach some sort of understanding with Putin, and make it hard for Ukraine to continue the war because Ukraine would not have access to American military supplies. I always expected Putin to be adamant, and that's turned out to be true. Sometimes I make mistakes, but not on this. And Trump himself realizes that Putin is the obstacle to a stable peace, which is Trump's actual objective in this war.
Remains to be seen whether this observation is going to be long-lasting. You've previously called the pausing of arms, of military aid shipments to Ukraine as a gift to Putin. Why is that?
Well, it's a gift to Putin because Putin wants to establish what I call effective political control of Ukraine. And to do that, he has to take Ukraine's Black Sea coast, Odessa and the surrounding area. He needs to take a good bit more territory, including Kyiv. So he wants to continue the fight. And while he says nice things to Trump about Trump's efforts to bring peace, he says no to the actual proposals. That's why. I don't disagree with you that my projection remains to be seen. There remain naive people around Trump who would just be happy to see Ukraine in Russia's clutches. But it's also true those people have become weaker within policy councils over the past 8 to 10 months, weeks.
Mm-hmm. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk told leaders this week that the war in Ukraine is a fight between civilization and barbarism. Is he right?
Of course he's right. Moscow is conducting a war full of war crimes, from the abduction of children, which has been, there's evidence to demonstrate at least 20,000 Ukrainian children have been kidnapped, to the torture, not just of Ukrainian soldiers, but Ukrainian civilians, to a severe campaign of repression against Christian groups not under the control of the Moscow Patriarchate of Russia. And of course, the bombing of civilians, the bombing of civilian infrastructure, all war crimes, all war crimes.
According to German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, the avenue of negotiation in this war is over, basically. So how do you see the current state of play in Ukraine? Where are we? Is a negotiation phase still possible? Is it even happening right now?
Well, there are no real negotiations. And when there were formal negotiations, the Russians were saying no, no, no. And even President Trump realizes that now, and he said so publicly. I think it would be wonderful if Chancellor Merz, who by and large has done a solid job on this, fulfilled his promise of telling Putin that if you don't stop the savage attacks on Ukrainian cities, I'm going to give Ukraine Taurus missiles. He's backed away from that, which is unfortunate. It's not just the United States, which is not providing the weapons Ukraine needs. It's also people in Europe who are talking tough. And that should change. The only way Putin might be willing to consider negotiating a stable peace, a stable ceasefire, is if he's seeing that he cannot make progress on the battlefield. And since Russian forces are not really moving forward on the battlefield, Putin is trying to break Ukraine via these savage attacks on Ukrainian cities and Ukrainian civilians.
How much does a just peace matter here? Could what happens in Ukraine embolden other around the world? I'm looking at Taiwan, for instance, China, for example.
I'm going to first take issue with the phrase just peace. I would love to see a just peace. And I think that strong American and European policy could produce a just peace. But a just peace means Ukraine gets back all or nearly all of its territory, that there are substantial reparations beyond the use of the $300 billion of frozen Russian state assets by Ukraine. And at this point, that's certainly not the policy of President Trump. He's trying to achieve a stable peace, which, while not ideal, is also not bad. But only even a stable peace could only be achieved if Western policy, American policy, German policy, French policy, EU policy is stronger than it is today. And we have accepted the Russian notion that if we provide Ukraine with more advanced weapons, that's escalation. Yet when Putin increases the number of drone and missile strikes on Ukrainian cities from 300 to 700 in one night, that's not escalation which merits a response. That is a weak policy which will not achieve the objective of a stable peace.
Right. Now, if I may, on the Ukrainian Recovery Conference, there's much talk about reconstruction, about investment, but does this type of event signify more a kind of coming together of Ukraine's friends at a crucial juncture?
Okay. I think that the record of now the 4 reconstruction conferences is not impressive. There's been a lot of talk about structures, about how once the war ends, we can put in resources. Yes, we should provide some resources now, but there's no reconstruction if Ukraine does not win this war. And by win the war, I mean emerge as a secure, stable, economically viable state, which would be, again, the secure peace that I referred to as opposed to the just peace. The way that happens is if all the countries assembled here provide the means to achieve that objective. Those means include, again, the weapons I've just discussed. It includes sanctions on Russia to batter the battered Russian economy. And it includes focus on getting economic resources into Ukraine right now. So France, which talks a very good game on defense steps, and Germany too, are blocking the use of the $300 billion in frozen Russian state assets to go to Ukraine. If they made a decision today, Canada and the UK are in the right place. The US was in the right place, and right now it's not clear what place they're in. But if you had Germany and France and Italy endorsing that, this thing could get done. And that would be massive immediate support for Ukraine. And then finally, there are literally huge firms across the West and elsewhere hovering around these conferences, looking for the big contracts and profits to be made once the war ends. Let some of those companies begin to invest in Ukraine right now, to establish a presence, to add to Ukraine's economy right now. There are ways to earn money in current wartime Ukraine. There's an extraordinarily innovative tech industry in Ukraine and, of course, military industry in Ukraine. And there are other opportunities. If the conferences produce some steps, again, like a venue for dealing with the frozen state assets, which it stays away from because key partners there don't want it, and on getting investors into Ukraine now, that will be a serious contribution. So I've been underwhelmed by these conferences, Rome no less than the previous ones.
I see. So the blame of inaction is somehow shared between Europe and the US. But also there's a worry.
So Europe has been doing more. Europe has been doing more. I'm not trying to whitewash. But, Trump has his own peculiar approach to things. He's kind of moving in the right direction now. And we should all praise the steps he's taken and encourage more.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, we are. But there's also a worry that U.S. could broker a deal that could possibly lead to land concessions for Ukraine, effectively putting regions in the hands of bankrupt Russia. Do you share those concerns?
In a way, but let me be precise. It's clear that there are naive people with access to the president, to my president, who would be happy to do what you've just said. And we've heard some of these very, very bad ideas, like recognizing Crimea de jure as Russian, even recognizing Luhansk and Donetsk Oblast de jure as Russian. There's no reason to do that. And that would be a dangerous mistake with bad applications elsewhere in the world. But it is true that Russia controls a good portion of Ukraine, that unfortunately, neither the US nor our European allies, our NATO allies, with the exception of some of the East European allies, like in Poland, like in the Baltic states, maybe the Nordics, maybe the Czech Republic, are talking about helping Ukraine recover substantial bits of Ukrainian territory. So you could have a stable peace that leaves Ukraine secure, economically viable, yet leaves Russia in de facto control of Ukrainian territory, but not acknowledged as such by most of the world. Not a great outcome, but not a terrible one either. That's certainly what I think is the most likely positive outcome we could expect today, barring changes in policy in Washington, Berlin, Paris, London, etc. I would like to see more than that, but unfortunately, I don't control policy. I simply can offer a sensible vision for pursuing American interests and making Russia pay for its very dangerous game in Ukraine, and reminding people in Washington and again, European capitals that Putin's big adversary is the United States, and he's coming for us if you're able to take Ukraine.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador, for your time here on the sidelines of the conference on the recovery of Ukraine.
Yes.
From Rome, thank you so much for joining us here on TVP World.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And thank you for watching World Talks on TVP World. I'm Anna Kalczyńska.